The text message from Tyler came in while I was sitting in my truck outside a grocery store at almost midnight, eating cold gas station pizza because I couldn't bring myself to go back to my apartment yet. Rain kept tapping against the windshield in uneven little bursts, and the parking lot was mostly empty except for a drunk couple arguing near the pharmacy entrance under one of those flickering yellow lights that make everybody look sick. I remember staring at them without really paying attention, thinking about how quiet my life had gotten since leaving the military. Not peaceful quiet, dead quiet. The kind where you start driving around at night, just so you don't have to sit alone with your own thoughts. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. "Tyler, you still looking for work?" I almost ignored it. Tyler and I hadn't talked much in over a year. Last I heard, he'd taken some kind of federal ranger job out west after getting out of the army. I wiped grease off my fingers and texted back, "Depends." 3 dots appeared immediately. Yellowstone's hiring seasonal rangers. Good pay. Housing included. You interested? I laughed under my breath when I read it. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away across the city. "You serious?" "Yeah." Another pause. "Honestly, man, I think this place would be good for you." That line stuck with me longer than it should have. I don't know why. Maybe because people had been trying to fix me ever since I got back overseas. Therapists, medication, support groups. Tyler was one of the only people who never treated me like damaged equipment. He just talked to me normally. A week later, I was driving through Wyoming with everything I still owned packed into the back of my truck. The farther west I went, the emptier everything became. Long stretches of highway, dead radio stations, pine forests rolling across dark mountains under heavy clouds. Somewhere past Cody, snow started falling hard enough that I had to slow down to 40. My headlights caught thousands of white flakes spinning violently through the darkness. It felt less like driving into a national park and more like disappearing into something. Yellowstone at night doesn't look real. Not the version tourists see online. The roads feel too isolated, too quiet. Steam rises from the ground in random places like the earth itself is breathing under the snow. Tyler told me to meet him at the Mammoth Station a little after midnight because he was finishing a late patrol shift. When I finally pulled into the parking lot, only 2 vehicles were there. A Ranger SUV covered in mud and Tyler's truck. Snow crunched under my boots as I climbed out. The cold hit instantly, sharp enough to hurt my teeth when I inhaled. The station lights glowed weakly behind frosted windows. Tyler opened the door before I even reached it. "Jesus Christ," he said, grabbing my shoulder. "You look terrible." "Good to see you too." He smirked tiredly and stepped aside so I could enter. The station smelled like burnt coffee, wet jackets, and old paper. Somewhere deeper in the building, a radio quietly hissed with static. Tyler looked older than I remembered. Thinner, too. There were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before deployment. "Long drive?" he asked. "About 20 hours too long." "Yeah, that sounds about right." He handed me a coffee without asking if I wanted one. It tasted awful. I drank it anyway. For a while, we just stood there talking about normal things. Old army stories. People from our unit. The weather. But something felt off with him. Little things. He kept glancing toward the dark windows every few seconds. Kept lowering his voice randomly in the middle of sentences, like he didn't want somebody overhearing us. Eventually I asked, "So what's the catch with this place?" Tyler gave a small shrug. "What do you mean?" "Federal housing, decent pay, fast hiring process. There's always a catch." He stared into his coffee for a second before answering. "Yellowstone scares people off. Beers. Sometimes." The way he said it made me look up. Outside, wind pushed snow across the parking lot in thin waves. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tyler didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to a filing cabinet near the wall and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "Look," he said quietly. "There are some things you need to know before your first patrol tomorrow night." He handed me the paper. At the top, typed in faded black letters, were the words "Nar Star Dro Calls." "You're kidding?" I said. "Just read it?" The first rule made me snort out a laugh. Raleigh number 1, if you see an animal standing perfectly still in the road after midnight, do not honk your horn at it. Wait for it to move on its own. Tyler. Keep reading. Ral number 2, if you hear whistling in the trees, and cannot determine the direction it's coming from, return to your vehicle immediately. Rel number 3, never respond to voices calling your name outside the ranger stations after 1 o'clock am. Rel number 4, if a visitor reports seeing lights moving through the forest north of Lamar Valley, do not investigate alone. Rel number 5, if you encounter 3 people standing together off trail at night and none of them are carrying flashlights, leave the area immediately. I looked up slowly. What is this? Tyler rubbed both hands over his face like he suddenly regretted bringing it up. Officially. Safety procedures. No. Seriously. I am being serious. I laughed again, but weaker this time. These are joke rules, right? Do I look like I'm joking? The room went quiet except for the static radio near the back office. I studied Tyler's face carefully then. He genuinely looked nervous, not amused, not sarcastic, nervous. Okay, I said slowly. What happened here? Tyler opened his mouth, then stopped himself. For a few seconds, he just stared toward the dark windows behind me. People disappear sometimes, he finally muttered. Tourists. Rangers too. A gust of wind rattled something outside hard enough to make both of us glance toward the parking lot. I don't know why, but the silence afterward felt heavier than before. Tyler walked over and lowered the blinds over the front windows. You'll hear stories from the others, he said quietly. Most of them sound insane. Don't get caught up in that crap. 90% of the time, there's a logical explanation. And the other 10%. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his coat from the chair beside the desk. You can crash in cabin 14 tonight, he said. Orientation starts tomorrow afternoon. That it? Pretty much. He paused near the door. One more thing. Yeah. Tyler hesitated long enough that I could hear the heating vents humming overhead. If you hear knocking on your cabin windows tonight, he said carefully, don't look outside. I stared at him for a second, waiting for him to smile. He didn't. Then, from somewhere far outside in the darkness beyond the parking lot, I heard 3 short whistles echo through the trees. I barely slept that night. Cabin 14 sat alone near the edge of a tree line about half a mile from the main ranger station, and the deeper the night got, the more isolated the place started to feel. At first it was almost peaceful. Snow falling softly outside, wind brushing through the pines, the old heater clicking every few minutes like it was struggling to stay alive. But sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke up with that same feeling I used to get overseas before mortar attacks. Complete awareness. My eyes opened instantly, and for a second I didn't even know why. Then I heard it. Knocking. Soft at first. 3 slow taps against the cabin window beside the bed. I stayed completely still under the blankets listening. The sound came again. Tap. 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 Not branches, not snow. Knuckles against glass. Tyler's warning immediately came back to me. If you hear knocking on your cabin windows tonight, don't look outside. I remember lying there staring into the darkness of the cabin, trying to convince myself this was exactly the kind of stupid psychological nonsense that spreads between isolated workers in remote places. Somebody hears an animal scratching at a window once, then a story gets exaggerated over the years until everybody's afraid of shadows. That explanation worked for maybe 30 seconds. Then the knocking moved. Not louder. Closer. 3 taps against the wall near the front door now. I slowly sat up in bed. The heater had stopped running at some point, and the cabin suddenly felt freezing. My breath fogged faintly in the dark. Outside, the wind had completely died. No trees moving. No snow hitting the roof. Just silence between those knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. No signal, of course. I checked the time. 2:17 am. Another 3 knocks hit the front door this time. Slow, patient. Like whoever was outside already knew I was awake. Every instinct I had told me not to open that door, but fear does weird things when you're isolated. It makes your brain desperate for certainty. I wanted to prove to myself this was just another ranger screwing with the new guy. I climbed out of bed and grabbed the flashlight sitting beside my duffel bag. The cabin floor creaked loudly under my feet. For a second, the knocking stopped completely. I moved toward the living room area, heart beating harder now. The entire cabin felt wrong somehow. Too still. I reached the window beside the front door and carefully pulled one corner of the curtain aside. At first I didn't see anything except darkness and snow. Then my flashlight beam caught movement near the trees about 30 yards from the cabin. Somebody was standing there. Tall. Motionless. I couldn't make out details through the snowfall, but I could tell they were facing directly toward the cabin. Watching it. Watching me. My stomach tightened instantly. "Hello?" I shouted through the glass before I could stop myself. No response. The figure never moved. Then the knocking came again, directly behind me. 3 soft taps against the back window inside the cabin kitchen. Every muscle in my body locked up. That's impossible, I remember thinking. I turned slowly toward the kitchen area. More knocking. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from just inches away on the other side of the glass. I aimed my flashlight toward the back window, but the curtains were closed. For a second, I genuinely couldn't move. I was still trying to process how something could be at the back of the cabin, while another figure stood near the trees outside front. Then the thing behind the kitchen window whispered my name. Ethan. Barely audible, a man's voice, calm and low. I stumbled backward so fast I nearly slipped. Ethan. Another whisper, closer this time. My pulse exploded into full panic. I recognized that voice. Tyler. I rushed toward the kitchen window and stopped myself inches before pulling the curtain open. Something felt deeply wrong about it. Tyler's truck wasn't outside. He wouldn't be standing at my cabin window at 2 in the morning whispering my name instead of using the door. Another long silence followed. Then came 3 whistles somewhere deep in the forest behind the cabin. The exact same pattern I'd heard outside the ranger station earlier. The whispering stopped immediately after that. So did the knocking. Complete silence returned all at once. I stood there breathing hard for nearly a minute, before finally forcing myself to look outside the front window again. The figure near the trees was gone. I didn't sleep after that. I sat at the kitchen table with a flashlight and an old revolver Tyler left in one of the drawers, waiting for sunrise. Around 6 in the morning, the heater suddenly kicked back on by itself. The normal sounds of the forest slowly returned with daylight. Wind in the trees. Ravens somewhere overhead. Snow sliding off the roof. By the time I drove back toward Mammoth Station later that morning, part of me was already trying to rationalize everything. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe another ranger playing some elaborate joke. Maybe I'd imagined the voice sounding like Tyler, because he'd planted the idea in my head earlier. That explanation started falling apart the second I saw Tyler's face when I walked into the station. "You look like hell," he muttered. "Somebody was outside my cabin last night." His expression changed instantly. Not surprise. Recognition. "You looked outside." "Only through the window." Tyler cursed quietly under his breath and glanced toward the hallway to make sure nobody else was listening. "Did it speak to you?" The fact he asked that made cold pressure spread through my chest. "Yeah." "What did it say?" "My name?" Tyler stared at the floor for a long moment. "Did it sound familiar?" I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. He already knew. Somewhere nearby, a radio crackled with static before a dispatcher's voice broke through. "Unit 7, possible wildlife collision near Roosevelt Junction." Tyler rubbed both hands over his face again like he hadn't slept either. "Listen carefully," he said quiet. "There are things out here that mimic people." I almost laughed at how insane that sounded. "Tyler, I know how it sounds." "No, you don't understand. You're telling me there are shapeshifters living in Yellowstone. I'm telling you people disappear out here every winter, and sometimes they come back wrong." The station suddenly felt colder despite the heaters running overhead. I stared at him waiting for some sign he was joking. "Nothing." "What exactly did you get me into?" I asked. Before Tyler could answer, the front doors opened hard enough to slam against the walls. Another ranger hurried inside covered in snow. "Cole's missing," he said immediately. The room went dead silent. "What?" Tyler snapped. "His vehicle was found near the North Trails about 20 minutes ago. Engine still running, driver's door open." Nobody moved for a second. Then everybody in the station seemed to come alive at once. Radios crackling, jackets grabbed, keys snatched off hooks. Tyler looked back at me with genuine fear in his eyes now. "Stay here," he ordered. "I'm coming with you." "No. Tyler, you don't understand this place yet." He grabbed his rifle from a locker near the wall. "And whatever you do," he added quietly, "if we find Cole, He stopped himself mid-sentence. "If you notice anything wrong with him," he finally said, "don't let him get close to you." The drive to the North Trails felt longer than it probably was. Snow hammered against the windshield hard enough that the wipers could barely keep up. And the deeper we pushed into Yellowstone, the more the world outside the SUV disappeared into white static. Tyler drove with both hands locked tightly on the steering wheel while dispatch chatter crackled softly through the radio between bursts of interference. Every now and then another ranger would call in a location update, but even those voices sounded tense, forced, like everyone was trying very hard not to say something out loud. I sat in the passenger seat watching the endless wall of pine trees slide past through the storm. Every few miles we passed warning signs half buried in snow or empty trailheads swallowed by darkness. The whole park felt abandoned. "How long has Cole been out there?" I finally asked. Tyler kept his eyes on the road. His last radio check was around 1:30. What was he responding to? Tourist complaint. About what? Tyler hesitated. Lights in the trees. I stared at him. That's it. That's enough. The radio hissed suddenly, followed by a loud burst of static that made both of us flinch. Then a voice pushed through the noise. Weak, distorted. "Help me." Tyler immediately grabbed the handset. "Cole." More static, then silence. "Cole, repeat your location." Nothing answered back except that awful empty crackling sound. Tyler swore quietly under his breath and pressed harder on the gas. About 10 minutes later we rounded a bend and saw the Ranger vehicle. Unit 7 sat crooked near the edge of the road, with the driver's side door hanging open and snow blowing through the interior. Its headlights illuminated the trees ahead in pale white beams that vanished into the storm. Tyler parked behind it and immediately killed our lights. "Why'd you turn them off?" I asked. Less attention. The fact that sentence made perfect sense to him bothered me more than I wanted to admit. The moment we stepped outside, the cold hit like a punch to the lungs. Wind roared through the trees, carrying fine snow that stung my face. Tyler grabbed his rifle from the back seat and chambered a round with practiced efficiency. He handed me a flashlight. "Stay close." We approached Cole's SUV carefully. Snow had already started collecting across the driver's seat and dashboard. The engine was still running. Radio still on. Tyler swept his flashlight slowly across the inside of the vehicle. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just an untouched cup of coffee sitting in the center console, slowly freezing solid. "Cole." Tyler shouted into the storm. No response. Then I noticed the footprints. A single trail leading away from the road into the trees. Tyler saw them too. "Damn it," he muttered. The tracks looked wrong immediately. Not because they disappeared into the forest. Because they didn't look like somebody running. They looked calm, evenly spaced. Like Cole had simply gotten out of his vehicle and walked willingly into the darkness. Tyler crouched near the tracks with his flashlight. "Something's off." "You mean besides all of this?" He pointed toward the snow. "These prints." I looked closer. My stomach tightened instantly. The footprints only went one direction. There were no tracks leading back out of the trees. "Maybe the snow covered them," I said, though even I didn't believe it. Tyler didn't answer. He just stood slowly and stared into the forest ahead. The trees beyond the road looked impossibly dense. Black trunks disappearing into blowing snow and darkness. Somewhere deeper inside, something metallic clanged softly in the wind. Then came the whistles. 3 short bursts. Faint. Deep in the woods. My pulse spiked immediately. Tyler's entire posture changed beside me. "Back in the vehicle," he said quietly. "What?" "No." Another whistle echoed through the trees. Closer this time. Tyler grabbed my jacket sleeve and started pulling me backward toward the SUV. "Tyler, what the hell is that? Move." The third whistle came from somewhere behind us. Both of us spun instantly toward the road. Nothing there except swirling snow and darkness. My chest tightened hard. There was no way something moved around us that fast without leaving tracks. Tyler shoved me toward the passenger side door. "Get inside." Then the radio in Cole's abandoned SUV suddenly crackled alive. "Unit 7 reporting," a voice said. Cole's voice. Tyler froze. So did I. The transmission continued through heavy static. "I found them." Silence. "Then, there's 3 of them." Tyler slowly raised his rifle toward the abandoned vehicle. "Cole." he called cautiously. The radio answered immediately. They keep smiling at me. Every hair on my arm stood up. The voice sounded almost right, but not completely. Like somebody imitating Cole after only hearing him speak a few times. Then the transmission dissolved into loud static again. Tyler grabbed me and practically threw me into our SUV before slamming the door behind us. "Start the engine," he snapped. "What about Cole?" Tyler looked pale now. Genuinely pale. That wasn't Cole. Before I could answer, movement appeared between the trees near the abandoned Ranger vehicle. 3 figures slowly emerged from the storm. My stomach dropped instantly. They stood shoulder to shoulder just beyond the headlights. Human silhouettes wearing dark winter jackets. Completely motionless. Snow blew around them in violent white waves, but none of them reacted to the wind. None of them moved at all. Tyler immediately killed the interior lights inside our SUV. "Don't stare at them," he whispered. "Drive." My hands shook as I shifted into reverse. The headlights swept across the figures again for half a second. I saw enough to know something was horribly wrong with them. Their faces looked too pale, too smooth. And every single one of them was smiling, not normal smiling. Wide, frozen, like mannequins trying to imitate human expressions. I hit the gas hard. Tires spun against snow before finally catching. The SUV fishtailed violently as we sped backward down the road. One of the figures suddenly tilted its head sideways at an angle no human neck should manage. Tyler swore under his breath, "Go, go, go." I turned the vehicle around and accelerated down the road, while my heart slammed hard enough to hurt. In the rearview mirror, the 3 figures remained standing exactly where they were, watching us disappear into the storm. Neither of us spoke for nearly 5 minutes. Only the sound of the engine and the storm filled the silence. Finally I said, "Tell me what that was." Tyler stared straight ahead through the windshield. "Nobody knows." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." I rubbed both hands over my face, trying to steady my breathing. "Those things, are those what took Cole?" Tyler didn't respond immediately. "Sometimes people vanish out here," he finally said quietly. "And sometimes they come back." A cold pressure spread through my chest again. "You mean copies?" Tyler nodded once. Outside, the storm continued swallowing the road behind us. "Years ago," he continued, "there were stories from the old fire watch crews. Rangers hearing familiar voices outside cabins at night. Missing hikers showing up days later acting wrong. Standing outside campsites watching people sleep. And the park just ignores this." Tyler gave a bitter laugh. "You think the government ignores anything inside a national park?" That answer sat heavily in the SUV. My mind kept replaying the transmission from the radio. "They keep smiling at me. What happens if one gets close to you?" I asked. Tyler looked exhausted suddenly. "You start hearing people you know calling your name." The radio crackled again before he could say anything else. "Dispatch this time. All units weather advisory issued for North Sector. Multiple reports of unidentified lights near Blacktail Plateau. Rangers are advised not to investigate sightings alone." Tyler immediately grabbed the radio. "This is Unit 12. We lost Cole." Silence followed for several long seconds. Then dispatch answered quietly, "Understood." No surprise, no questions. Just that one word. Understood. That scared me more than anything I'd seen so far, because it meant this wasn't new. Then, somewhere far behind us in the darkness beyond the storm, I heard 3 whistles echo through the trees again, and this time they sounded much closer than before. By the time we got back to Mammoth Station, the storm had swallowed almost the entire park. Snow blasted sideways across the parking lot under the floodlights, and the trees beyond the Ranger buildings had completely disappeared into white darkness. The station itself looked different now. Smaller somehow, like the storm had cut it off from the rest of the world. Tyler parked hard near the entrance, and for a second neither of us moved. The engine idled softly while both of us stared through the windshield at the glowing windows of the station. "You ever think about quitting?" I asked quietly. Tyler gave a tired laugh without humor. "Every day." "Then why stay?" He looked at me for a moment before answering. "Because they don't let people leave easily." That sentence sat in the air between us long after we stepped outside. The cold hit even harder now. My face immediately burned from the wind as we hurried toward the entrance. The second we walked inside, Every conversation in the station stopped. Rangers standing near the radio desk turned toward us all at once. Nobody had to ask what happened. They could see it on Tyler's face. A woman I hadn't met yet lowered her eyes immediately when Tyler shook his head once. "How long before sunrise?" somebody quietly asked. "About 6 hours," another ranger answered. Nobody liked that answer. The station suddenly felt less like a workplace and more like a bunker. Radios hissed constantly with scattered transmissions from patrol units sheltering in place across the park. Snowstorms weren't unusual in Yellowstone, but the tension filling the building had nothing to do with weather. Everybody looked exhausted, nervous, like they'd all been waiting for something bad to finally happen again. Tyler led me down a narrow hallway toward a small office near the back of the station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere deeper in the building, a coffee pot shattered against the floor and made somebody curse loudly. Tyler closed the office door behind us. "You need to understand something," he said immediately. "What we saw tonight is real. I know what I saw." "No, you don't." He dragged a hand across his face. "That's the problem. Nobody really does." He opened a filing cabinet beside the desk and pulled out a thick folder stuffed with old reports and photographs. Some of the papers looked decades old. "These incidents go back years," he said quietly. "Maybe longer." I flipped open the first report. Missing hikers. Search teams hearing voices in empty forests. Rangers disappearing during solo patrol. Witness statements describing people standing motionless near roads at night. Every report had pieces that sounded insane on their own, but together they painted a pattern that made my stomach slowly tighten. "Why hasn't this gone public?" I asked. Tyler gave me a look that practically answered the question itself. "Because national parks bring in billions of dollars every year." He leaned against the desk. "And because nobody would believe it anyway." I kept flipping through the reports. One photograph stopped me cold. 3 figures standing near a tree line during a snowstorm. The image was blurry and grainy, probably taken from far away, but the shapes were unmistakable. Even in the photo they looked wrong somehow. Too still, too symmetrical. "When was this taken?" I asked. Tyler glanced down. 1998, and nobody figured out what they are. People tried. His voice lowered slightly. A wildlife biologist disappeared investigating them in 2004. 2 federal agents vanished near Blacktail Plateau in 2011. After that, he stopped himself. "After that what?" Tyler stared toward the office door for a second before continuing. "The government got involved directly." Before I could ask more, the station radio suddenly erupted with loud static somewhere outside the office. Then came shouting. Tyler immediately grabbed the folder and hurried out into the hallway with me right behind him. Several rangers had gathered near the main dispatch desk now. One of them was pale enough to look sick. "Say again." Dispatch barked into the microphone. Static answered. Then a terrified voice broke through. "Something's outside the west cabins." The transmission crackled violently. "I can hear them talking." Tyler stepped closer immediately. "Unit 9, identify what you're seeing." Silence. Then breathing. Fast. Panicked breathing. "They keep using our voices," the ranger whispered. Every person in the room went completely still. "How many?" Tyler asked. Another long pause. "I think." The voice trembled badly now. "I think there's 6 of them." The transmission cut dead. Nobody spoke for several seconds afterward. Somewhere outside, wind slammed against the station walls hard enough to make the windows shake. Then came 3 whistles. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The room changed instantly after that. Rangers started moving quickly between windows, checking locks, shutting blinds. One older ranger walked through the station, turning off unnecessary lights one by one. I stared at all of them in disbelief. "What are they doing?" I whispered to Tyler. "Making the building less visible." "To what?" He didn't answer. Then the lights flickered overhead. Once. Twice. Everybody froze. Somewhere near the back of the station, a woman quietly muttered, "No, no, no." The lights stabilized again, but the tension didn't leave. I suddenly became aware of how isolated the station really was. Blizzard outside, radios failing, roads buried in snow. No tourists, no outside traffic. Nothing but miles of wilderness surrounding us in every direction. Then somebody knocked on the front door. Every head in the room snapped toward the entrance immediately. 3 slow knocks. Tap, tap, tap. Nobody moved. Another 3 knocks followed a few seconds later. Slower this time. Deliberate. My chest tightened instantly. One ranger near the windows whispered, "Jesus Christ." Tyler carefully moved toward the front entrance with his rifle raised slightly. He motioned for everyone else to stay back. The entire station had gone dead silent except for the wind outside. Tyler stopped beside the door without opening it. "Who's there?" He called loudly. For several seconds, nothing answered. Then a familiar voice spoke from outside. "Tyler." My blood went cold immediately. "Cole." The voice sounded weak. "Freezing. Please let me in." Several rangers exchanged terrified looks. Tyler didn't move. "Cole." "I got lost." The voice outside said, "I can't feel my hands." The knocking returned softly against the door. "Please." I looked toward Tyler. His face had gone completely pale again. "That's impossible," somebody whispered behind me. The voice outside continued, "Tyler, come on, man." It sounded exactly like Cole now. Exhausted. Shivering. Human. "I know you're in there." Another pause. Then slowly the voice changed. Subtle at first, like hearing a recording distort. "Why won't you let me inside?" Every instinct in my body screamed that something was deeply wrong. The station lights flickered again overhead. This time they dimmed long enough for darkness to swallow the entire building for half a second before returning. During that brief blackout, I heard movement outside the windows. Not footsteps. More like multiple people slowly dragging themselves through snow. The voice outside the door stopped speaking altogether. Then came the whistles again. 3 sharp bursts directly outside the station now, much closer than before. Tyler slowly stepped backward away from the entrance. "Everybody away from the windows," he ordered quietly. Nobody argued. I moved with the others toward the center of the station, while my pulse hammered violently in my ears. Then one of the rangers near the west hallway suddenly froze. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What?" Tyler snapped. She pointed shakily toward one of the darkened side windows. I turned just in time to see a pale face standing outside the glass, smiling at us from the storm. Then another face appeared beside it, and another, all perfectly still, watching the station silently through the snow. There were more than 6 now. A lot more. And every single one of them looked like someone we knew. Nobody spoke for several seconds after the faces appeared outside the windows. The storm kept blowing around them in violent white gusts, but the figures themselves remained perfectly motionless. That was the part my brain couldn't process. Snow hit them. Wind pushed against their jackets and hair. Yet they stood there like mannequins, placed outside the station by somebody with a sick sense of humor. Smiling. Watching us. One of the rangers beside me whispered, "There's too many." Tyler slowly backed farther away from the windows, keeping his rifle raised. "Nobody goes outside," he said quietly. "Nobody opens any doors no matter what you hear." His voice sounded steady, but I could hear fear underneath it now. Real fear. One of the older rangers near dispatch looked like he was about to be sick. "They've never come this close before." That sentence hit me hard. Before. Meaning this wasn't some one-time event. This had happened enough for them to compare it to earlier incidents. The lights flickered overhead again. A low electrical hum spread through the station before stabilizing. Outside, more figures slowly emerged through the snow beyond the floodlights. Some stood near the parked vehicles. Others lingered near the trees at the edge of the property. All of them still. All smiling. My eyes locked onto one near the west fence line, and my stomach immediately dropped. It looked exactly like Tyler. Same height, same dark winter jacket, same face. Except the smile stretched too wide across its mouth. "Tyler," I muttered quietly. He followed my gaze and immediately went pale. "Don't look at them too long," he warned. "Why?" "Because they start changing." I stared at him. "What the hell does that mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved toward the radio desk and grabbed a map from underneath several folders. "There's an emergency shelter beneath the old maintenance tunnels," he said. "If the station loses power completely, we move there." Somebody near dispatch shook their head. "We should call federal response." Tyler gave a bitter laugh. They already know. The ranger looked away after that. Nobody argued. Somewhere outside, something slammed hard against the side of the building. Several people jumped. Then came another impact farther down the wall. Not random. Controlled. Like somebody testing the structure. "They're getting bolder," one ranger whispered. I realized then that none of them were acting confused anymore. Terrified, yes, but not surprised. That terrified me more than the things outside. My military training kept trying to force logic onto the situation. Hallucinations, mass panic, some kind of organized cult living in the park. Anything explainable. But every explanation kept collapsing under the details. The voices, the impossible movements, the way those things appeared in storms without leaving tracks. Then the station radio crackled violently again. Dispatch reached for it automatically. Static filled the room. Then came a voice. "Mammoth Station, this is Unit 4 requesting entry." Everyone froze. The voice belonged to Rachel, one of the rangers currently stationed near the south entrance checkpoint. Dispatch grabbed the microphone. "Rachel, confirm your location." "Outside the east lot." The voice answered immediately. "My vehicle died." Tyler's expression darkened instantly. "No vehicle could have made it through this storm," he muttered. The voice continued through the speaker. "Please open the side gate. I'm freezing out here." One of the younger rangers looked toward Tyler nervously. "What if it's actually her?" Tyler turned sharply. "And if it's not?" Silence filled the station again. Then 3 slow knocks echoed against the east hallway door. Tap, tap, tap. The younger ranger flinched hard. "Jesus Christ." The voice from the radio started again, softer this time. "Tyler." My chest tightened immediately. It sounded exactly like Rachel now. Desperate, exhausted, human. "Please don't leave me out here." Tyler walked over and shut the radio off completely. The voice died mid-sentence. Nobody moved. The storm outside seemed louder now. Wind screaming through the trees. Snow striking the windows. Somewhere in the distance, 3 whistles echoed faintly across the valley again. Then something began scratching against the roof. Slow dragging sounds moving from one side of the building to the other. Everybody heard. You could see it in their faces immediately. One ranger quietly whispered a prayer under his breath. The scratching stopped directly overhead. A second later came footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, walking across the roof of the station. My entire body went cold. "That's not possible," I muttered. Snow covered the roof completely. Nobody could walk on it without collapsing through. The footsteps continued anyway. Slow circles above us. Then they stopped directly over the main room. Silence followed. Long enough that I became aware of my own heartbeat again. Then a voice spoke from above the ceiling. "Ethan." My blood froze instantly. My mother's voice. I hadn't heard it since her funeral 4 years earlier. Every muscle in my body locked up. Around me, several other rangers reacted too. One woman covered her mouth and started crying quietly. Another ranger backed against the wall whispering, "No, no, no." Like he was trying to convince himself not to listen. The voice came again. Softer now. "Please help me." I couldn't breathe for a second. It sounded perfect. Every tiny detail exactly right. The exhaustion in her voice. The slight rasp from years of smoking. Even the way she used my name. Tyler grabbed my shoulder hard enough to snap me out of it. "Don't answer." I realized then that I'd started moving toward the hallway stairs leading to the roof access door. The voice shifted again overhead. "Ethan." This time it sounded hurt. Crying. My chest physically ached hearing it. Tyler tightened his grip on my arm. "That isn't her." I forced myself to nod, but part of my brain still wanted to believe it. That was the horrifying part. The things outside didn't just imitate voices. They knew exactly how to weaponize them. Then the footsteps above us suddenly sprinted across the roof. Fast. Inhumanly fast. The sound moved from one side of the station to the other in seconds before ending with a violent crash, somewhere outside near the rear lot. Everybody jumped. A ranger near the windows screamed, "Movement." We all turned instinctively. The figures outside were gone. Every single one. The parking lot now stood empty beneath the storm. No faces. No silhouettes. Nothing. For one horrible second, relief swept through the room. Then the emergency lights activated overhead with a loud click. The main power died instantly after. Darkness swallowed the station except for dim red backup lights glowing through the halls. Somebody cursed loudly. Dispatch grabbed a flashlight. Generators offline. Tyler immediately stood. Everybody move. Maintenance tunnels. Now. The station erupted into motion. People grabbed rifles, radios, emergency kits. Outside, the storm continued roaring against the walls while we hurried through the darkened hallways toward the basement access door near storage. The red emergency lights made everything feel unreal. Shadows stretched strangely across the walls. Radios hissed with broken static. Halfway down the basement stairs, the scratching started again. This time from inside the walls. Something moving between them, following us downward. One of the rangers near the back panicked. "Move faster." The scratching accelerated immediately after he shouted. Rapid movement behind the walls now, too fast. Pipes rattled violently overhead. I gripped my flashlight harder while my pulse hammered in my throat. The tunnel entrance sat behind an old maintenance door, beneath the station boiler room. Tyler unlocked it with shaking hands while the noises inside the walls grew louder. Closer. Then somebody screamed upstairs. Not a quick scream. A long one. Cut off suddenly mid-breath. Everybody froze. Tyler looked back toward the staircase. "Keep moving," he ordered. Another scream echoed through the station above us. Then came gunfire. Short bursts, followed by absolute silence. Tyler slowly shut the maintenance door behind us. The heavy metal latch clicked into place. For several seconds, nobody spoke. We just stood there breathing hard in the dim tunnel light, while distant banging echoed somewhere above us through the pipes. Then from the other side of the sealed maintenance door, somebody knocked softly 3 times. Tap, 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 and Tyler's voice quietly said, "Let me in." Nobody moved after the voice outside the maintenance door spoke. The tunnel had gone completely silent except for the distant groaning of old pipes somewhere deep underground and the sound of everybody breathing too fast. The emergency lights overhead flickered weakly, casting dull red shadows across the concrete walls. Tyler stood directly beside me, gripping his rifle so tightly his knuckles looked pale, which meant the voice outside the door wasn't him. That should have made the situation simple. It didn't, because the thing on the other side sounded perfect. Same exhausted tone, same breathing pattern, same slight rasp in his throat from years of smoking. "Tyler," the voice whispered again through the metal door. "Open up, man." One of the younger rangers near the back actually took a step forward before another ranger grabbed his jacket and yanked him back. "Don't." The thing outside the door knocked 3 more times. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence returned. I stared at Tyler. How does it know where we are? He shook his head slowly without taking his eyes off the door. "I don't think they track people normally." "Then what?" Tyler looked sick. "I think they follow fear." That answer sat heavily in the tunnel. Nobody spoke after that. The air down there smelled old and damp like mildew and rusted metal. Water dripped steadily somewhere farther down the corridor in slow, uneven echoes. The maintenance tunnels beneath Mammoth Station stretched farther than I expected. Old concrete passageways originally built decades earlier to connect utility systems between ranger buildings. Most of them weren't even used anymore. Tyler finally motioned for everyone to move. "We stay quiet," he whispered. "Lights unless necessary." Nobody argued. We started deeper into the tunnels, single file beneath the dim red emergency glow. Every footstep echoed softly through the corridor. Behind us, the maintenance door remained silent. That almost bothered me more than if something had been scratching against it. My brain kept waiting for the thing outside to become violent, to start pounding or screaming or trying to break through. Instead, it simply stopped making noise altogether, like it already knew where we were going. The deeper we moved underground, the colder the tunnels became. Steam drifted from old pipes running along the ceiling. Some sections looked abandoned for years, with collapsed shelves, rusted tools, and old storage crates stacked against the walls. Every now and then we passed faded government warning signs half peeled from concrete. "Resta ESES. Now." One of the older rangers named Mercer walked beside me, carrying a flashlight low against his chest. He looked exhausted. You said this has happened before, I whispered. Mercer nodded faintly. Not like tonight. Then what happened before? He hesitated before answering. Small incidents. Missing hikers. Voices outside campsites. Rangers hearing things in the woods. He glanced toward Tyler walking ahead of us. But they usually stayed deeper in the park. Until now. Mercer didn't answer. Somewhere far behind us, something metallic slammed loudly through the tunnels. Everyone froze instantly. The sound echoed for several long seconds before fading into silence again. Tyler slowly raised one hand. Lights off. Flashlights clicked dark one by one until the tunnel fell into near total blackness except for weak emergency bulbs every 20 feet. My heartbeat sounded unbelievably loud in my own ears. Then came footsteps, not ours. Somewhere deeper in the tunnels ahead. Slow, uneven, dragging slightly against the concrete floor. One of the women behind me quietly started crying under her breath. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Then a voice echoed faintly through the darkness ahead. Help me, Cole. Every muscle in my body tightened instantly. The voice sounded weak and terrified now. Human. Please. Nobody moved. Tyler kept his rifle aimed into the darkness. That's not him, Mercer whispered quietly, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself too. The voice came again. Closer this time. They won't let me leave. A cold wave crawled slowly up my spine. The tunnel distorted sound strangely underground. It was impossible to tell exactly where the voice came from. Ahead, behind, beside us. It shifted unnaturally through the concrete corridors. Tyler, the voice whispered. Please. Tyler's jaw tightened visibly. For the first time since I'd met him here, I saw genuine emotion crack through his composure. Guilt. Fear. Maybe both. Keep moving, he muttered. We continued deeper into the tunnel network while the voice occasionally echoed behind us. Sometimes begging. Sometimes crying. Sometimes just whispering our names softly from somewhere in the dark. Eventually, the emergency lights stopped completely. Tyler finally allowed flashlights again after we reached a larger maintenance chamber filled with old generators and rusted electrical panels. The room smelled strongly of oil and wet concrete. Water dripped steadily from ceiling pipes into shallow puddles across the floor. We stop here for now, Tyler said. Everyone looked exhausted already despite only being underground less than an hour. Nobody wanted to admit how terrified they were becoming. Mercer leaned against one of the generators and rubbed both hands over his face. The station's gone. Tyler didn't argue. Federal response should arrive by morning. One of the younger rangers laughed nervously. You actually believe they're coming? Tyler looked toward him slowly. They always come. Something about the way he said that bothered me. Always. Tyler hesitated. After incidents, I stared at him. What kind of incidents? Before he could answer, one of the women suddenly whispered, "What's that smell?" Everyone went quiet immediately. At first I only smelled mildew and rust. Then it hit me too. Smoke. Faint but unmistakable. Tyler cursed softly and moved toward the tunnel entrance we'd come through. A dim orange glow now flickered faintly down the corridor behind us. Fire. They're burning the station, Mercer said quietly. Nobody answered him because everybody already knew he was right. The realization settled heavily over the room. If the station burned, so did the radios. Supplies. Vehicles. Everything. We were trapped underground beneath miles of wilderness during a blizzard while things wearing human faces hunted people through the park above us. Then one of the flashlights caught movement near the far end of the generator room. Somebody screamed immediately. A figure stood motionless near one of the support pillars, half hidden in darkness. My pulse exploded into panic again before I realized it was human. Actually human, a man. Injured badly. He wore an old park ranger jacket stained dark with blood and dirt. His beard looked overgrown. Eyes sunken and exhausted. "Don't shoot," he rasped weakly. Tyler raised his rifle anyway. "Who the hell are you?" The man slowly lifted both hands. "Name's Daniel Huxley." He coughed painfully. "I worked fire watch here in 2016. Silence filled the room. Tyler looked genuinely shocked. "Huxley," Mercer whispered. "They said you disappeared." Huxley gave a weak laugh. "Yeah." He glanced nervously toward the tunnels behind us. That's what they tell people. Something about him immediately felt real in a way the others never had. Exhaustion, fear, actual human imperfection. He moved like somebody injured and freezing, not like those things outside. Tyler lowered the rifle slightly. "How are you alive?" Huxley stared at him for a long moment before answering. "Because I learned the rules." Nobody spoke. The orange glow from the distant fire flickered faintly against the tunnel walls now. Huxley slowly sat against one of the generators, breathing hard. "They aren't animals," he said quietly. "And they aren't ghosts either." "Then what are they?" I asked. Huxley looked directly at me. "They're echoes." The room stayed silent. Huxley swallowed hard before continuing. "This place remembers people." A loud metallic bang echoed somewhere deep in the tunnels behind him. Huxley's face instantly changed. Real terror this time. "Turn the lights off," he whispered urgently. "Right now." Tyler frowned. "Why?" Huxley stared into the darkness beyond the corridor. "Because they found us." Then, from somewhere deep underground ahead of us, dozens of voices began softly whistling in unison. The whistles echoed through the tunnels in layers, overlapping each other in a way that made it impossible to tell how many voices there actually were. Some sounded close, others impossibly far away. The concrete corridors carried the noise strangely underground, until it felt like the entire tunnel system itself was breathing around us. Nobody moved for a second. Then Huxley lunged forward and grabbed Tyler's arm hard enough to make both of them stumble. "Lights off," he hissed. "Now." Tyler finally reacted. Flashlights clicked dead across the generator room one by one until only faint orange firelight from the distant station blaze flickered through the corridor behind us. Darkness swallowed almost everything else. The whistles stopped immediately after. That silence somehow felt worse. I stood there barely breathing while my eyes slowly adjusted. Shapes emerged gradually in the dimness. Pipes overhead. Massive generators lining the walls. Shadows stretching unnaturally across the floor. Somewhere water dripped steadily into a puddle with slow, hollow echoes. Huxley kept staring toward the deeper tunnels like he expected something to appear any second. "How many are there?" Mercer whispered. Huxley answered without looking away from the darkness. "Depends how many people the park remembers." That sentence crawled coldly through my chest. Tyler crouched beside him. "Explain." Huxley swallowed hard. Even in the dim light I could see how exhausted he looked. His ranger jacket hung loose on his frame like he'd lost serious weight over time. "Yellowstone wasn't the first place this happened," he said quietly. "Just the biggest." Nobody interrupted him. Years ago they thought it was isolation psychosis. Rangers alone too long in remote stations. Hallucinations. Shared paranoia. He gave a weak laugh. Then people started disappearing. The distant firelight flickered harder now as smoke slowly drifted deeper into the tunnels. Somewhere above us something heavy collapsed with a muffled crash. Probably part of the station route. Huxley continued. "The first reports go back over a century. Explorers hearing voices at night. Search parties following familiar sounds into the woods and never returning." He glanced toward me. "Ever notice how quiet Yellowstone gets after dark?" I nodded slowly. "That silence isn't natural." A low scraping noise suddenly echoed from somewhere deeper in the tunnels ahead. Everybody froze instantly. It sounded like shoes dragging slowly across concrete. Huxley's expression tightened. "Keep your voices down." The scraping stopped. Then came 3 soft whistles somewhere nearby. Much closer than before. One of the younger rangers quietly started panicking. "We can't just stay down here." Tyler grabbed him before his voice rose too loud. "Control yourself. They're everywhere!" "Quiet." The ranger's breathing turned ragged. What if they already got outside? Nobody answered because nobody wanted to think about it. My brain kept replaying the faces outside the station windows. Friends. Rangers. People smiling wrong in the snow. What are they actually trying to do? I asked Huxley quietly. "Replace people." Huxley stared into the darkness for several seconds before answering. "I don't think they understand people well enough for that." "Then why copy us?" "Because that's how they get close." Somewhere behind us deeper in the tunnel system, metal suddenly screamed loudly against metal. Everyone jumped. Then came footsteps. Fast this time. Sprinting through the corridors somewhere nearby. My pulse exploded again. Tyler raised his rifle toward the darkness ahead. The footsteps stopped abruptly. Silence followed. Then a flashlight beam suddenly flickered far down the tunnel. Somebody approaching. "Help!" a voice shouted weakly. "Please!" The younger ranger beside Tyler immediately moved forward. "That's Rachel." Tyler grabbed him hard. "No." The flashlight beam bobbed unevenly closer through the darkness. The figure carrying it looked injured, limping. "Please," Rachel's voice cried out again. "They're behind me." Huxley's face had gone pale. "Don't answer." The figure stumbled closer into view now. It looked exactly like Ranger Rachel. Same jacket, same blonde hair matted with snow and blood. She collapsed hard against the tunnel wall, breathing heavily. "Tyler," she gasped. "Thank God." Every instinct in my body wanted to help her. That was the horrifying part. She looked terrified. Human. Real. Tyler kept his rifle aimed but didn't fire. "Stay where you are." Rachel stared at him in disbelief. "What? Don't come closer." "Tyler, what the hell?" Tears mixed with dirt on her face now. "They attacked the checkpoint." Huxley quietly whispered beside me. "Watch the eyes." I focused harder on Rachel's face. At first everything looked normal. Then she blinked, too slowly, like she'd learned the motion from watching other people do it. My stomach tightened instantly. Tyler saw it too. "Back away," he ordered. Rachel's expression changed slightly. Not much, just enough. Confusion replacing fear for a split second, like she didn't understand why the performance wasn't working. Then she smiled. The transformation happened unnaturally fast. 1 second terrified. The next smiling wide enough to split her face almost ear to ear. Several rangers recoiled instantly. The thing wearing Rachel's appearance tilted its head sideways slowly. "Tyler," it said softly. Its voice no longer sounded human. There was something layered underneath now. Multiple tones speaking slightly out of sync. "Why are you hiding?" Tyler fired instantly. The rifle blast detonated through the tunnel like a bomb. The figure jerked violently backward against the wall. For one impossible second it stayed standing despite the hole blown through its chest. Still smiling. Then the tunnel lights overhead flickered wildly. The figure suddenly sprinted sideways into darkness with terrifying speed. Not human speed. Gone in seconds. Everyone stood frozen in shock after the gunshot echoes faded. "Jesus Christ," Mercer whispered. Tyler kept the rifle aimed into the darkness, breathing hard. "Move," Huxley snapped suddenly. "Now." "Why?" I asked. Huxley looked genuinely terrified now. "Gunshots attract them." Almost immediately after he said it, distant whistles echoed again through the tunnels. A lot more this time. The sounds multiplied rapidly from different directions underground. My blood ran cold. "Move," Tyler shouted. Panic finally broke the group apart. We hurried deeper through the maintenance tunnels, while the whistles continued spreading behind us. Some close, some impossibly distant, like signals being passed between things moving beneath the park. Smoke from the burning station drifted thicker through the corridors now. The deeper we went, the older the tunnels became. Concrete gave way to rough stone in some sections. Rusted rail tracks appeared beneath layers of dust like parts of the underground system predated the park itself. "What is this place?" I asked while we moved. Huxley glanced around uneasily. "Original excavation tunnels." "Excavation for what?" He hesitated. "Nobody knows officially." Mercer looked toward him sharply. "You saw it though, didn't you?" Huxley didn't answer immediately. That alone felt like an answer. The whistles suddenly stopped altogether. Silence crashed down around us instantly. Everybody slowed. "Why'd they stop?" One ranger whispered. Huxley looked horrified now. "Because they're close." Then all the emergency lights ahead went dark at once. Complete blackness swallowed the tunnel. Somebody screamed immediately. Flashlights snapped on in panic. Their beams shook wildly across the stone walls. And standing at the far end of the corridor ahead of us were at least 15 people. Motionless. Smiling. Wearing faces we recognized. Cole. Rachel. Rangers from the station. Even tourists I vaguely remembered passing earlier that week. All standing shoulder to shoulder blocking the tunnel exit. None of them blinked. None of them breathed. Then one near the center stepped forward slightly. It wore Tyler's face. "You shouldn't have come underground," it said softly, and behind us. Somewhere deeper in the darkness we'd already passed through, more footsteps began slowly approaching. Nobody breathed after the figures appeared at the far end of the corridor. The flashlight beams shaking in our hands illuminated pale faces standing perfectly still in the darkness ahead, and the deeper the light reached, the more of them I realized were there. Not 15. More. Shapes layered behind shapes in the tunnel like a crowd waiting silently underground. Some wore ranger uniforms. Others looked like hikers, tourists, park employees. People the park had apparently swallowed over years without anyone truly understanding where they went, and every single one of them was smiling. The thing wearing Tyler's face took another slow step forward. "You shouldn't have come underground," it repeated softly. Its voice echoed strangely through the tunnel walls, almost overlapping with itself. Tyler kept his rifle raised, but for the first time since I'd met him, I saw his hands shaking. "Back up," Mercer whispered. Nobody needed convincing. The entire group slowly retreated farther down the corridor, while the figures ahead remained motionless, simply watching us. Then one of them twitched. Not a normal movement. Its neck jerked sharply sideways with a loud cracking sound before snapping back upright. Another figure beside it copied the motion immediately after. Then another. The sound spread through the tunnel in rapid succession. Crack, crack, crack. My stomach turned violently. "Don't run," Huxley warned quietly. "If you panic, they rush you." I stared at him in disbelief. "Rush us?" Huxley never answered because the lights behind the figures suddenly flickered on for half a second. In that brief flash, I saw how many were really standing there. Dozens. The tunnel ahead was packed with human shapes stretching far back into darkness. Then the lights died again, and the figures started walking toward us. Not sprinting, not charging, just walking slowly in total silence except for the soft scraping of boots against concrete. Tyler backed away carefully with the rifle aimed center mass. "Move," he said quietly. We retreated deeper through the tunnel system, while the things followed at a steady pace behind us. Every few seconds, flashlight beams caught pieces of faces emerging through darkness. Smiles, pale eyes, familiar people wearing expressions that looked copied rather than felt. Somewhere farther back among them, I saw another version of Rachel moving unnaturally fast between the others on all fours like an animal. I immediately looked away. "Jesus Christ," one ranger whispered behind me. The tunnels narrowed ahead before opening into a massive underground chamber that looked nothing like the maintenance corridors above. The walls here were rough volcanic stone instead of concrete. Rusted support beams disappeared high into darkness overhead. Old rail tracks crossed the cavern floor beneath layers of dust and mineral deposits. My flashlight beam swept across faded government equipment abandoned decades earlier. Drilling machines, fuel containers, collapsed crates stamped with military markings. Huxley stopped dead the second we entered. "No," he whispered. Tyler looked at him sharply. "What?" Huxley's face had gone pale again. "This is where they started. Behind us." The footsteps continued approaching steadily through the tunnel entrance. Tyler turned toward the cavern. "Move." We hurried across the massive chamber, while flashlight beams bounced wildly through darkness. The air here felt wrong, warmer somehow, thick with moisture and the smell of sulfur rising from somewhere underground. Every sound echoed strangely. Then I noticed the markings on the stone walls. Thousands of scratches carved into the rock. Names, dates, messages, some so old they'd nearly faded away. US. One message near the rail tracks looked newer than the others. Mercer stared at the walls in horror. "How long has this been happening?" Huxley answered quietly. "Longer than the parks existed." A loud metallic screech suddenly echoed from the tunnel behind us. Everyone turned instantly. The figures had reached the cavern entrance now. They stood clustered together in silence beneath the darkness of the tunnel opening, watching us. More shapes kept appearing behind them endlessly. Tyler fired another rifle round into the ceiling support beam above the entrance. The ancient metal structure groaned loudly. "Move," he shouted. We ran across the cavern as the support beams behind us collapsed with an explosive crash. Stone and debris thundered down, sealing the tunnel entrance beneath tons of rock. Dust exploded through the chamber. Several people screamed. Then silence returned again except for distant, shifting rubble. Nobody relaxed. Tyler lowered the rifle, breathing hard. That won't hold them forever. Huxley stared deeper into the cavern with growing panic. We shouldn't be here. Why? I asked. Huxley hesitated before answering. Because this is where the excavation team found the chamber. The word chamber made my skin crawl immediately. What chamber? Huxley pointed deeper into darkness beyond the rail tracks. There's something buried under Yellowstone. Nobody spoke after that. My flashlight beam drifted farther across the cavern floor until it caught another tunnel opening carved directly into volcanic rock. Unlike the maintenance tunnels, this passage looked ancient. Smooth black stone disappearing downward into complete darkness. Warm air flowed out of it steadily, carrying a faint smell of decay. Huxley stared at the opening like he wanted to run. The government sealed it in the 70s after the first disappearances. And then? Tyler asked quietly. Huxley swallowed hard. Then people started hearing voices underground. A low whistle suddenly echoed faintly from somewhere beyond the collapsed tunnel behind us. Everybody froze. Another whistle answered deeper inside the cavern. Then another. They were surrounding us underground now. Mercer looked panicked. How are they still moving around us? Huxley shook his head slowly. Because these tunnels connect to everything beneath the park. The cavern suddenly trembled lightly beneath our feet. Dust drifted from the ceiling overhead. Somewhere far below us came a deep groaning sound like shifting earth. My chest tightened. Yellowstone sat on top of one of the largest volcanic systems on Earth. The entire park already felt alive above ground. Down here it felt ancient. Wrong. Like we'd stepped into something buried long before humans ever arrived. Then one of the younger rangers screamed suddenly and pointed across the cavern. Flashlights snapped toward the far wall. A figure stood there alone watching us, not smiling this time. My pulse stumbled hard when I recognized the face. Cole. Actual Cole. He looked exhausted and half-frozen, his ranger jacket torn open and covered in dirt. Don't shoot, he rasped weakly. Tyler lowered the rifle slightly in disbelief. Cole. Cole staggered toward us unevenly. Human movement. Imperfect. Real. Thank God, he whispered. Mercer moved immediately to help him, but Huxley grabbed his arm violently. Wait. Cole stopped walking. What? Huxley stepped closer, eyes locked onto him. What's the last thing you remember before disappearing? Cole looked confused. The patrol. What patrol? The lights near Blacktail Plateau. Huxley studied him carefully. Who was your training officer? Tyler. What year did you join the park service? Cole hesitated for half a second too long. Huxley's expression changed instantly. Back away. Cole's face slowly lost all emotion. What? Tyler raised the rifle again. Cole. Then Cole smiled. Not wide at first, just enough. But his jaw kept stretching farther and farther, until the skin around his mouth split open with a wet tearing sound. Several people screamed immediately. Cole's body jerked unnaturally sideways as bones cracked loudly beneath his skin. His arms lengthened slightly, fingers twitching wrong. Run, Huxley whispered. The thing wearing Cole suddenly shrieked. The sound blasted through the cavern loud enough to physically hurt. Then every whistle underground answered at once. From tunnels, from darkness, from somewhere deep beneath our feet. Hundreds of voices whistling together through the buried chambers under Yellowstone. And all around the cavern beyond our flashlight beams, smiling figures slowly began emerging from the dark. The shriek echoed through the cavern long after the thing wearing Cole's face stopped making it. The sound bounced between the volcanic walls in distorted waves until it felt less like hearing something and more like being trapped inside it. Then the figures started moving, not slowly anymore. The smiling shapes emerging from the darkness rushed toward us from every direction with horrifying speed, their movements jerking and twitching unnaturally as flashlight beams bounced across pale faces and stretched limbs. "Run!" Tyler shouted. Panic finally shattered whatever discipline the group still had left. Everyone bolted deeper across the cavern, while the things behind us flooded through the darkness like a wave of bodies. Their footsteps sounded wrong, too synchronized, too fast. Some moved upright. Others crawled low across the stone on all fours, their joints bending in impossible directions, while they whispered in voices stolen from people we knew. "Tyler. Mercer? Help me." My lungs burned as I sprinted alongside Huxley toward the ancient tunnel carved into black volcanic rock at the far side of the cavern. Behind us came screams, gunshots, then screaming again. I risked one glance backward and instantly regretted it. One of the younger rangers had fallen near the rail tracks. 3 smiling figures were crouched over him now, their movements spasming violently while he screamed and tried to crawl away. Then his scream abruptly stopped. Tyler grabbed my jacket hard and yanked me forward. "Keep moving!" We reached the black stone tunnel entrance just as Mercer slammed his shoulder against an old rusted emergency gate hidden beside the wall. The metal screeched loudly before giving way enough for us to squeeze through. Tyler fired several rifle shots behind us, while the remaining survivors shoved themselves into the narrow passage. Then Mercer pulled the gate shut again with a violent clang, just as pale hands slammed against the other side. The entire tunnel shook from the impact. Everybody collapsed against the walls, breathing hard in darkness, while the things outside scraped and clawed against the metal barrier. The sound made my skin crawl, not because it was violent, because it sounded curious, like animals testing a cage. Huxley immediately pushed deeper down the tunnel. "Move before they find another way around." The black stone corridor sloped downward steeply beneath Yellowstone. Unlike the maintenance tunnels above, this place looked ancient and untouched. Smooth volcanic walls curved naturally around us, wet with condensation that reflected weak flashlight beams in strange patterns. The air felt warmer the deeper we descended. Heavy, sulfuric. Somewhere far below us came a deep, rhythmic vibration like distant machinery or maybe something geological shifting underground. My chest tightened with every step. "What is this place?" I asked between breath. Huxley didn't slow down. "The original chamber." "You keep saying that." "Chamber for what?" Huxley glanced back at me with exhausted eyes. "They found it during excavation work in 1972. Park officials thought they'd uncovered a volcanic pocket beneath the north sector." He swallowed hard. Then workers started hearing voices underground. The tunnel suddenly widened ahead into another massive cavern, but this one looked nothing like the excavation chamber above. I stopped dead the second my flashlight swept across the walls. Thousands of handprints covered the stone. Human handprints burned black into the volcanic rock from floor to ceiling. Some looked ancient, others disturbingly fresh. "Jesus Christ," Mercer whispered. At the center of the cavern stood a structure that immediately made my brain reject what I was seeing. It looked almost organic. A massive circular opening descending deeper into darkness beneath the earth, surrounded by smooth black formations twisting upward like roots or bones fused directly into the stone. Warm air rose steadily from below, carrying faint whispers with it. Actual whispers. My pulse stumbled violently. "What the hell is that?" Tyler asked quietly. Huxley stared at the pit with obvious terror. "Nobody knows." One of the surviving rangers shook her head slowly. "That's impossible." "You think anything tonight's been possible?" Huxley snapped. Then the whispers changed. I froze instantly because I recognized the voice drifting upward from the darkness below. My brother, dead 8 years. Ethan, soft, faint, almost lost beneath the deeper vibrations underground. Several others reacted too. Mercer covered his mouth suddenly like he'd heard someone familiar. Tyler shut his eyes tightly for half a second. The pit was speaking to all of us differently. Huxley backed away immediately. "Don't listen to them." "Them," I whispered. Huxley pointed toward the darkness below the opening. "That's where the echoes come from." Before anybody could respond, the metal gate far back up the tunnel screamed loudly. Something had broken through. Then came footsteps rushing down the corridor toward us. A lot of footsteps. Tyler raised his rifle again. "No more running," he muttered. "We're trapped." The surviving group spread out instinctively around the chamber entrance, while flashlight beams shook across the tunnel behind us. The whispers rising from the pit below grew louder now. Familiar voices layered together softly beneath the earth. Parents, friends, dead loved ones. My hands physically shook trying to block it out. "Why are they copying people?" I asked Huxley desperately. "Because the thing below us doesn't understand humanity," he answered quietly. "It imitates what it hears." "What thing?" Huxley looked toward the pit again. We think it's alive. Silence filled the cavern except for the approaching footsteps. My brain fought desperately for logic, but every explanation collapsed immediately under the weight of what we'd seen. You're saying Yellowstone is sitting on top of some organism? Not exactly. Huxley's voice lowered, more like a memory. The footsteps stopped just beyond the tunnel entrance. Then came silence. Tyler tightened his grip on the rifle. Why'd they stop? Huxley looked horrified. Because they're waiting. One of the rangers suddenly screamed and pointed upward. My flashlight beam snapped toward the cavern ceiling. Figures clung there upside down in the darkness above us. Dozens of them. Smiling faces staring downward silently from the rock formations overhead. My stomach lurched violently. One dropped from the ceiling instantly. Tyler fired before it even hit the ground. The rifle blast exploded through the chamber, while the thing collapsed, twitching across the stone floor. For one brief second, my flashlight illuminated it clearly. The body looked unfinished somehow. Human features stretched across something not fully shaped underneath. Its mouth kept moving after death, whispering softly in multiple voices at once. Then the rest fell from the ceiling. Chaos detonated instantly. Gunshots thundered through the cavern. Screaming echoed everywhere. The smiling things rushed between us with terrifying speed, slamming people against the stone walls, while familiar voices poured from their mouths. Mercer emptied his handgun into one wearing Rachel's face before another tackled him into darkness. Tyler fought beside me near the pit entrance while pale figures crawled across the walls around us like insects. One grabbed my arm suddenly. Ice-cold fingers. I turned and nearly vomited. It wore my face, same eyes, same scars, smiling at me with a mouth too wide for human anatomy. "Ethan," it whispered softly. I shoved it backward instinctively. The thing stumbled near the edge of the pit and suddenly froze. Its expression changed completely. Fear. Real fear. Then something below grabbed it. A black shape erupted upward from the darkness beneath the chamber opening and yanked the creature screaming into the pit below. Silence slammed through the cavern instantly afterward. Every smiling figure stopped moving at once. All of them turned toward the pit together, watching, listening. Then, slowly, they began backing away from the opening. Huxley stared downward in horror. Oh no. A deep sound rose from beneath us then, not a roar, not an animal noise. Something older, vast, like the earth itself inhaling beneath Yellowstone. The entire cavern trembled violently. Cracks spread across the volcanic walls. Dust exploded from the ceiling overhead. Tyler grabbed my arm hard. "We need to leave now." Then the whispers below the pit stopped completely. And for the first time all night, absolute silence filled the underground chamber. The silence inside the chamber felt worse than the screaming, worse than the gunshots, worse than the voices wearing faces stolen from dead people. Everything underground beneath Yellowstone had suddenly gone still all at once, and every instinct in my body told me that whatever lived below us had finally noticed we were there. The cavern trembled again beneath our feet. Dust rained from the ceiling in soft gray clouds, while deep cracks spread slowly across the volcanic walls surrounding the pit. The smiling things standing around us kept backing away from the opening in complete silence now. Their expressions hadn't changed, but something about their movements had. Fear. Real fear. Tyler grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Move." Nobody argued. The few survivors still standing immediately retreated toward the opposite side of the chamber, while the things around the pit continued staring downward into the darkness below. None of them tried stopping us anymore. Huxley looked completely broken now, pale, breathing hard. "It woke up?" he whispered. "What woke up?" I snapped. Huxley stared toward the pit without blinking. The original. Another tremor rolled beneath the cavern, this one stronger. Somewhere deep underground came that same impossible sound again. A low inhaling vibration that didn't sound geological anymore. It sounded alive. Tyler shoved Mercer toward the tunnel entrance ahead. "Find another way out." Mercer looked terrified. "What if there isn't one?" Tyler didn't answer. Because we all already knew there probably wasn't. The black stone tunnel leading away from the chamber sloped upward sharply through volcanic rock while the cavern behind us continued shaking harder every few seconds. We moved fast now, limping, exhausted, half deaf from gunfire and adrenaline. Somewhere behind us, the smiling things had started moving again, but not toward us. They were fleeing deeper into the underground system, away from the chamber like animals escaping a wildfire. That terrified me more than anything else at all night. "Why are they running?" one ranger whispered. Huxley answered quietly without slowing down. "Because they belong to it." The tunnel narrowed farther ahead before splitting into two separate passages. Tyler immediately stopped. "Which way?" Huxley hesitated. For the first time since meeting him underground, he genuinely looked unsure. The excavation maps never showed this far down. A loud crack echoed through the tunnel behind us like collapsing stone. Then came screaming. Human screaming. Distant. Short-lived. Everybody froze instantly. Another scream followed deeper underground before cutting off abruptly. Mercer looked sick. "What the hell is happening down there?" Huxley swallowed hard. "I think it's feeding." Nobody spoke after that. The warm air flowing through the tunnels suddenly smelled worse now. Wet earth mixed with decay and sulfur. My flashlight beam shook across the black volcanic walls while distant vibrations continued rolling beneath our feet like something enormous shifting underground. Tyler chose the left passage finally. Move. We pushed deeper uphill through the tunnel while the tremors gradually intensified. Small rocks started falling from the ceiling around us. Behind me, one of the surviving rangers quietly muttered prayers under her breath nonstop. I understood the impulse. Logic had stopped existing hours ago. Eventually, the tunnel widened into another corridor lined with rusted steel doors set directly into the volcanic rock. Old government markings covered the walls here. Quarantine sector. Restricted access. Hazard containment division. Tyler stopped dead reading them. Jesus Christ. Huxley looked equally horrified. This section wasn't on any official records. Mercer grabbed one of the rusted door handles and pulled hard. Locked. The next one, too. Then we heard movement behind one farther down the corridor. Soft scratching from inside. Everyone slowly raised their weapons. The scratching stopped immediately after we noticed it. Then came 3 knocks from the other side of the steel door. Tap, tap, tap. My blood ran cold instantly. Tyler backed away slowly. Keep moving. Another knock echoed through a different door farther down the corridor. Then another. Soon the entire hallway filled with soft tapping sounds from behind the sealed containment rooms surrounding us. Hundreds of slow, patient knocks echoing underground beneath Yellowstone. The ranger behind me started crying openly now. "No, no, no." Huxley suddenly froze mid-step. "Listen." Everybody went silent. At first I only heard the knocking. Then something else emerged underneath it. Wind. Faint but real. Fresh air moving somewhere ahead. Tyler heard it too. Exit tunnel. We hurried toward the end of the containment corridor, while the knocking behind the steel doors gradually grew louder. More aggressive now. Some doors actually rattling slightly under impacts from inside. My pulse hammered so hard it hurt. At the far end of the hallway we found a heavy blast door, partially opened several feet. Cold air poured through the gap, carrying snow with it. Outside, we immediately rushed toward it. Then one of the containment doors behind us exploded open. The sound detonated through the corridor like a gunshot. Everybody spun around instantly. Darkness filled the broken doorway for half a second before something crawled out onto the floor. Not one of the smiling copies this time. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. It looked human only in fragments. Multiple faces stretched together wrong beneath pale skin that moved like liquid around shifting bones underneath. Arms too long. Fingers splitting apart and reforming as it dragged itself into the hallway. And every face across its body was whispering softly at once. The ranger beside me screamed immediately. Tyler fired without hesitation. The rifle rounds tore chunks from the creature's body, but the wounds folded back together almost instantly like closing mouths. "Move!" Tyler shouted. Panic exploded through the corridor again. We shoved through the blast door into freezing night air, just as more containment doors behind us burst open down the hallway. I only caught glimpses while running. Shapes dragging themselves into the corridor. Bodies built from mismatched human parts. Faces we recognized fused into things no longer human at all. Then Mercer slammed the blast door shut behind us with all his weight. The metal boomed violently as something hit the other side instantly. We stumbled out into the middle of a snow-covered forest beneath Yellowstone, just before dawn. The storm had mostly died now, leaving only freezing wind moving through endless pine trees under a dark gray sky. For several seconds nobody spoke. We just stood there breathing clouds into the cold air, while the earth beneath us occasionally vibrated faintly. Then distant helicopter rotors echoed somewhere overhead. Tyler looked up immediately. Black helicopters emerged through the clouds, moving low across the forest toward Mammoth Station. No marking, no lights. Mercer gave a weak laugh. Federal response. Huxley's expression didn't change. Too late. The helicopters swept past overhead toward the burning remains of the station, somewhere miles away beyond the trees. Then gunfire echoed faintly across the valley. Sustained bursts. Not rescue operation. Containment. Tyler looked exhausted suddenly. Older than ever. We need to leave the park. Huxley shook his head slowly. You don't understand. He pointed toward the ground beneath us. It's spreading. Silence followed. Nobody wanted to ask what he meant because part of us already knew. Then came the whistles. Not underground this time. Out in the forest around us. 3 short bursts drifting between the trees. One nearby. Another answering farther away. Then dozens more spreading across the snow-covered wilderness in every direction. Tyler immediately raised his rifle again. Shapes stood between the trees now. Motionless figures barely visible through snowfall, watching us silently from the forest edge. Some looked human, some didn't anymore. And among them I saw people who should have been dead. Mercer, Rachel, Cole, even Huxley, smiling at us from between the trees while the real Huxley stood beside me staring in horror. They're learning faster now, he whispered. The helicopters overhead suddenly changed direction sharply. One tilted violently sideways midair like something had struck it. Then the aircraft disappeared behind the trees, followed by a massive explosion that shook snow loose from the branches around us. Another helicopter immediately banked away, trying to escape the valley. It never made it. Something enormous moved beneath the forest canopy in the distance. I only saw pieces of it between the trees. Pale shapes unfolding upward impossibly high before the second helicopter spiraled out of the sky, trailing smoke. Nobody spoke after that. There was nothing left to say. The park wasn't hiding isolated creatures anymore. Whatever existed beneath Yellowstone was waking up completely. Tyler slowly lowered his rifle. We're not getting out, are we? Huxley looked toward the endless forest surrounding us. Not really. Another whistle echoed nearby. Then another answered behind us. The figures between the trees began slowly walking closer through the falling snow. Calm, smiling, patient. I remember backing away instinctively while my flashlight beam shook across familiar faces moving through the forest. And somewhere far beneath the earth below Yellowstone, something vast inhaled again. The ground trembled softly under our feet. Then every figure in the trees opened their mouths together and whispered the exact same thing in perfect unison. Welcome back. If you ever find yourself alone in the woods at night, and you hear someone whistling your name from the trees, don't answer. Some places were never meant to be explored after dark. Yellowstone still hides things no one can explain. If you enjoyed tonight's story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me what rule would terrify you the most if you worked the night shift at Yellowstone. And remember, some voices in the dark aren't human.